The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. I hand over the floor to the defense team for Mr. Nuon Chea to resume his examination of the witness.
Thank you, Mr. President. During the break, I understood that there is no really any follow-up in relation to the redacted answers of the witness. However, the International Deputy Co-Prosecutor kindly suggested, and I thank him for this, that of course nothing prevents me from asking the same questions to the witness. So what I would do now, I would like to ask the same questions to this witness, and then hopefully he will give the same answers as he has given to the investigators. Mr. Pak Chim and Mr. President, it's not strictly necessary anymore, but I'm referring to E127/7.1.4. It is question 44. So I will just repeat that question, and hopefully you'll be able, Mr. Pak Chim, to give the same answer. The question is, Mr. Pak Chim, do you know anyone who can tell us more about Sector 13 organizational structure?
They were all dead, except Mr. Mahmoud. He was in charge of Sector 13 with Saum. Saum was dead too. Chit is still alive. Mut is still alive. And the rest were all dead.
What was it? Do you remember, Mayor Smoot? Was that the name that you gave to the investigators who could tell us more about Sector 13? I will withdraw that question.
Just to clarify, what shouldn't be done here is to make connections to this information to where this came from. I don't want to say more than that. I did not mean in any form or fashion for you to be asking these questions in the context of this specific document.
I apologize, Mr. Prosecutor. You're right. Withdraw the last question. My question to you, Mr. Pak Chim, do you know any former cadres from the Southwest Zone or the Northwest Zone who are still alive and living in Udor Mian Chi province?
I have given the names to the court for a long time, for 2 years when you went to ask me at my house. I told that some of them had already died and others were still alive, are still alive.
ក្រៅពីនោះមានមេតបគេនៅធ្វើការក្នុងរបបរាល់ថ្ងៃ
And some who are still alive are in the military, in the present government, but I don't want to be long wending into this matter.
I appreciate your answer, Mr. Pak Chim, but would you nevertheless be so kind and to tell us which cadres from the southwest zone or the northwest zone who are still alive and living in Udur Minche province?
Apart from those I have informed the court, I cannot think of any others. Those whom I know who are still alive, I have already informed the court.
Another question I have for you, Mr. Pak Chim, is about the arrest of Say, also known as Kang Chap. What can you tell us about the arrest of Say? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. S-E. Say.
Sai, alias Kong Chap, went along with me when I went to work in the rubber plantation. He worked with Brother Pog in 41, Sector 41, and they was in charge of the Old North Zone.
Do you know why he was arrested?
No, I don't. He was attached to Siem Reap for a few months, around 3 to 4 months. He was arrested. And then Brother Pog told me that Sai was arrested. And I asked why, and he only said that it was the order from the upper echelon. And then I remained silent. It was the decision of the upper echelon. I dare not inquire any further. And I was only focusing on the task I was assigned to, and I was only told that it was the order of the upper echelon that he was to be removed.
Have you ever come to learn that Say implicated you and your brother as belonging to his network?
That I do not know. It is the first time today I have heard of it.
Maître Copé, pouvez-vous nous dire...
Counsel Copé, can you tell us where you got this information from? And maybe these are confessions that were obtained at S21 under torture.
How would you know, Judge Lavergne, whether this was coming from torture, whether it was coming from a confession. I'm just asking a general question, and I'm not referring to anything.
I'm sorry, I am the one putting a question to you, Mr. Council Koppe. Where is the source of this information?
In the case file.
Ne vous moquez
Please, don't joke. Which elements in the case file allow you to assert such a thing?
I'm not asserting anything. I'm asking whether he knows if, say, implicated him as being part of his network. That was my very general question, and I think I'm entitled to ask that question.
Counsel, what's the basis for your question? That was a very clear question to you.
Yes, but I'm entitled not to answer that question.
alors.
So then you're dropping this line of question?
No.
The President, Mr. Deputy Prosecutor, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can answer the question. He's making a reference to the S-21 confession of Kang Chap. It's document E3/2792. There's a list, a very long list of implicated persons at the end, hundreds of persons, and the witness is number 47 on that list. Let me just make 2 points. Earlier, counsel also attempted to put a question to a witness that was from the content of an S-21 confession when he asked whether it was Chuchet or Kang Chap had stated that Sam was aggressive, and then withdrew the question. Attempts to put before this chamber information that is certainly believed to be induced by torture is inappropriate when you are putting it forward for the truth of the matter, which is what he was doing with this question related to Sam. With respect to this question, I think there is a legitimate question that can be made. Certainly not for the truth of the matter. It would be absurd, and we believe it is absurd on its face for the hundreds and thousands of people who were identified as traitors using torture. What would be relevant would be to know whether the fact he had been implicated was communicated to him by Kai Pak or someone else. So to the extent that is the question, whether this confession was then used in the regime and communicated to people, I think would be appropriate. To use it for the truth of the matter is entirely barred. So I just wanted to state our view, because some things that he's doing today are entirely inappropriate. If he keeps trying to use S-21 confessions for their truth, we may need a standing order on this. But there are permissible questions, and we want to make that clear as well.
If I may respond, Mr. President, I would like to have a very clear ruling on this question. I'm not referring to anything. I'm referring to a possibility of this witness being somehow implicated as belonging to somebody's network. I think that is a general question which, as formulated by me in the way that I have done, should be and is permissible. If you do not say so, then I would not only like to have your decision, but also a reasoned decision, because we're going to be facing this situation more often in the near future, I would imagine. In addition, I would like to add that, as the prosecution, of course, is well aware, we have made a point of appeal, appeal ground on this very issue. It is now, or it will soon be debated before the Supreme Court chamber, whether it is in fact permissible to use elements of S21 confessions, not in the sense to use it against the accused, but in the sense of a foundation for possible further questions. So it is an issue which is going to be debated soon. However, we're also dealing now with progress in the case 2.2. So I would like to have your decision on this, but also a reasoned decision.
Counsel, on exactly what do you want a decision? Do you want a treatise on the use of torture-tainted evidence dealing with all eventualities?
No.
If not, I suggest, in order to clarify all our thoughts and focus them, to tell us in writing what exactly you want us to clarify. I think there is probably agreement that torture-tainted evidence cannot be used. There is a prohibition against the use of torture-tainted evidence. I guess we also agree that you don't only use this evidence if you specifically refer to it, but if you use the information coming from it. But if not, as I said, tell us in writing what exactly you want us to clarify. This is much too wide an issue to deal with it summarily without knowing what to focus on.
Thank you, Judge Vance. I think the position of the trial chamber is clear when it comes to the use of torture-tainted evidence. Whether I'm referring to that at this point in time is unclear. What I do like, and that I think is possible, of course, within the realm of today, is your ruling whether I am allowed to ask this specific question and your reasoning. So my specific question I think has been asked already. I think I heard also the answer. But please tell me if I can ask this question again.
Before you, I just want to make sure I understand what the question is. If the question, in any form or fashion, he's suggesting to the witness whether there's truth that he was part of a network, I object. If the question is simply was this communicated to him that he had been named in an S21 confession, that's an entirely appropriate question. But if he's asking this to try to suggest it is true that there was a network of traitors, that's entirely precluded by the convention.
I'm not implying that at all. I'm asking whether he knows, whether he's aware of the fact that say has implicated him. That is the question that I'm asking, and I would like to know if I can ask that question.
បាទអង្គជំរះសម្រាប់
The President. The Chamber decides that the Chamber would rule on this point in question over lunchtime. So if you have any further questions, Council, you may proceed.
I will. Thank you, Mr. President. I have a few last topics, Mr. Pakchim. First question is related to your answer in E319.1.18, question 244. The question that was put to you is the following. Did you know what happened to the Khmer Krom when they arrived in Kirivong district? Your answer is, I was not worried about the Khmer Krom because they were mistreated by the Vietnamese, so they fled to Cambodia. Can you expand a little bit on the mistreatment of the Khmer Krom by the Vietnamese? How do you know this? What happened to them?
I heard of it from word of mouth, and at the time Tamok also made an announcement that the Vietnamese mistreated Khmer Krom. And some of the Khmer Krom themselves talked to each other about that. In Takeo, Preveng and Svay Rieng province, people over there knew very well that the Vietnamese mistreated Cambodian and Khmer Krom. That's why there was a sentiment of hatred from our ancestor, our previous generations. We did not like the Vietnamese.
And did those Khmer Krom victims of maltreatment by the Vietnamese tell you or others why they were mistreated by the Vietnamese?
No, they didn't, but there was an announcement, and when later on it was disseminated from one to another. We were national compatriots. We have shared a border with the Vietnamese, and for Khmer Krom, they have lived in Vietnam for many years, but we have come from the same clan. That's why we share our suffering, and when they were mistreated by the Vietnamese. So we try to help them when they came to us, when they came to ask us for example, food. We could help them, but that was all we could have.
Were any of these Khmer Krom people who had come from Vietnam, were they mistreated in your district because they were Khmer Krom?
That I do not know. When I was there, I did not know about that.
Let me rephrase it. Was there any policy in relation to the Khmer Krom who had just come from Vietnam, in terms of how they were to be treated for food, health, and education? Were they treated the same way as everybody else?
As a matter of principle, there is a political line for the Khmer Krom. In other words, we had to warmly welcome them. We had to treat them very well because they were mistreated by the Vietnamese. They had to desert their home in Vietnam to come to Cambodia, so we had to do everything we could in order to treat them well.
Is it correct, Mr. Pekchum, that both Ieng Sary and Son Sen were originally coming from Kampuchea Krom?
I am not sure about his personal background on this matter.
So you don't know whether Son Sen and Ieng Sary originally came from Kampuchea Krom, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I am not sure.
Then another topic, Mr. Pekchum, what can you tell us about moral offenses? What does the term moral offenses mean? What did the term mean in democratic Kampuchea, a moral offense?
It carries several meanings when it regards to the kinds of offenses. It could be the affairs between a man and a woman, and it's about the disrespect to the elders, or the mistreatment by men toward women, or sometimes the women themselves committed a moral offense against their husbands. These kinds of offenses were considered a moral offense.
Have you ever become aware of instances in which a cadre sexually assaulted a woman, and if yes, would he be punished for his actions?
In my capacity as a cadre in the managerial role, I never saw any subordinate cadres who committed a moral offense against any woman. However, there was one instance who was a former resistant coming down from the mountain. He was assigned to stay in an office in Prey Kduit, as he was not fit to work in the commune or district's office, and that person was not directly my subordinate. And in fact, I heard about this story from his younger brother. That he did not, or he was suspended from working in the office. And from my further investigation, I heard that he had a moral offense with the wife of a former soldier, and for that reason he was removed. And I did not involve in his removal from that office, but it was done by the upper echelon.
But do you know whether there was a policy or whether there were instructions that any cadre that committed a sexual offense against a woman would be punished for this moral offense?
Yes, there were regulations on that. It was part of the education. And as people who were involved in that would be sent to work in the fields, to engage in the rice farming activity, or in raising pigs. And as to the period of refashioning, it's varied depending on the behavior of that individual.
Could you say something in general terms what the DK's policy was in relation to the rights of women in general? And can you make a comparison to pre-democratic Kampuchea and a time within DK as what the rights of women were?
I did not see anything strange in terms of the national policies and the traditions in Cambodia. If one commits an offense, regardless of the status of that person or gender of that person, either a man, a woman, a father or mother, the person will be considered as an offender. And I think the tradition, that kind of practice and tradition lives on today in Cambodia.
Let me rephrase my question or put it in a different way, Mr. Pekchim. Did men and women have equal rights within the Constitution of Democratic Kampuchea and within daily life within your district?
When we talked about the right of an individual, everybody is equal at all levels, either at a commune, a district, or a provincial level. So it means that men and women had to do the same kind of work. And we had a respective male and female chiefs of the units for the male and female units. And as men and women were put in separate units, the moral offense issue was rarely a case. The shortcomings are that the cadres were young and were experienced, and as a result, it led to conflicts when they led those people to work.
Thank you, Mr. Bekçim. Now another topic again. You have briefly testified about the conflicts in 1975 and 1976 between, on the one hand, the district party, and on the other hand, the district front. And I believe that at one point, Tassom announced that there was no difference anymore between the front and the party. Can you tell us a bit more about the nature of this conflict, the character of this conflict between, on the one hand, the front, and on the other hand, the party?
Allow me to clarify it. In fact, there was no such conflict. At that time, the front was at the front, or was the public face, and the party was behind. So, from the point of view of the general public or the population, they did not see the party. They only saw those people working at the front, but they did not see the party behind the front. And later on, the people made a joke. There was one person at the Takil district who engaged in the work for the party. And he talked behind the back that those people who work at the front could not move any further beyond the militia unit. And I recall that that person named Huon, and he passed away. And some later on clarified that when you refer to the front belonged to the party. And after that, everybody seemed to understand, and the situation quieted down. But before that, there was a confusion, and there seems to be a separation between those working for the front and those working for the party. And that is all on the issue of the front and the party.
Thank you, Mr. Bekçim. Another topic that is a follow-up question of an earlier question of the prosecution relating to something you said in your statement E3/401. That is English ERN 00381025, Khmer 00373475, and French 004-26214. You were shown, because of this statement, a document with Anne's signature and an annotation on the top of that document saying that the persons referred to in the document were to be smashed. Now, there's two things that I would like to ask your clarification about. You said that if names in confession were crossed in red ink, that would mean that this person would be purged. Now, I would like to ask you about the specific words crossing and the red ink. Was it always crossing of names? Was always red ink being used? Can you give us some more details about that?
Allow me to clarify the crossing was done by my superior. And in my instance, it was done by either Kom or Mut. Upon receipt of the report by Anne, and when I received it back, it was in an opened envelope, and some names had been crossed. And then Com would have the letter put in another envelope, sealed, and sent away by the messenger. And that's how I observe the crossing done by my superior. And in some instances, a proposal to some was made in order to be lenient to certain individuals mentioned. And sometimes there was a request for rice to be sent, and that's how I learned about the existence of a Krang Tachan Security Center. Previously, I thought it was located up in the mountain, but only through the communication I learned of its location. And that is all.
So am I to understand clearly that it was necessary that with a red pen a name was actually crossed? So only if we could see a name being crossed with a red pen, then that would mean that this person was to be purged. Is that correct?
I think you have repeated that question several times, and I have already given my adequate response to that. And please, I'd like not to repeat what I have said or I have made in the statements, and you may refer to my previous statements with the Office of the Investigating Judges. I do not want to repeat responses to the questions, as there might be variation discrepancies, and that would lead to further time to be questioned. President interrupts. Mr. Pitcham, it is your obligation to respond to the questions put to you. Secondly, the Chamber has to consider the evidence being put in this confrontational way, like what we are doing now in this court, in order for us to evaluate the validity and the weight of such evidence before we are able to render our legal opinion. Your previous statements are, of course, a source of evidence. However, your testimony here before us is also an evidence for the Chamber. We understand about your previous statements, and if we are able to take those statements and form our legal opinion, it would be not necessary to invite you here for further testimony. And please be mindful of that.
I was asking you the question, Mr. Pekchim, because we do not seem to have any original documents where we can discern whether ink is red or blue. And we also don't have any names which are actually crossed. So I'm asking you to think clearly on what the practice was. Did a name have to be crossed out in red ink? So I apologize if I repeat my question, but it is important to understand.
I am happy to respond to the questions for the trial chamber to the best of my ability, since I want justice to be done and served. President, Mr. Witness, you have not responded to the last question by Counsel Copper. And you are reminded that if the question is of a repetitive nature, the Chamber has its discretion to prohibit that question, or concerned parties, namely the prosecution, will be on his feet to object such a question. I refer to repetitive questions or leading questions which are prohibited in the proceedings before this chamber. And if the question is not objected, or if the chamber does not allow it, then you shall respond to that question. And Counsel Copper, please repeat your last question so that the witness can respond.
My question was whether you know the names of people who were to be purged, were to be physically crossed by a red ink pen.
Okay.
Everything was there on the paper, and whatever the decision to be made by the upper echelon, they would do it.
I'll move on, Mr. President, to two last points that I would like to have ask questions about. First, you remember testifying about a person with a handicap called P. Have you ever heard that P was executed in 1979 by the Vietnamese at Dam Ril Mountain?
After the arrival of the Vietnamese, some people learned about that. Since we all fled in our own way, we only learned that some people died. And yes, I heard that P died.
But did he die in combat, or was he executed by the Vietnamese?
I do not know the cause of his death, I only know that he died.
My very last question, and that is a question on Tram Kok district in terms of structure. I'm not quite sure if I heard you correctly, but did you at one point say that Tram Kok district consisted of 14 villages, or did I not hear that well?
I refer to the 14 communes and not the 14 villages.
ភូមិច្រើន
There were many villages, and I cannot recall the exact number of the villages. It could be about 50 or more than 100 villages under that district.
Maybe I made a mistake, and I apologize for that, Mr. Bekchim. What I meant is how many sub-districts or communes you said that Tram Kok had. Did I hear you say 14 communes and or sub-districts?
I just said the district comprised of 14 communes.
I believe that we have tried to determine how many communes Tram Kok had at the time. So the ones that we have, I will name for you, and then would you please be so kind to add the ones that you still remember. We have Kus, Samrong, Traping Kang Tom Tbung, Traping Tom Chung, Tram Kok, Neng Nang, Srei Renong, and Tapem. That is 8 communes. Are there 6 others? Did we not get that well? There might be Popol. Can you name us the other ones?
After Tapem, it was on Tasaum, Li Bo, Popel, Chieng Tong, and please add the one that I just said. If it ends up to 14, then it's correct. Then there are 2 more. Pok Bombay and Bang Kangai.
អស់ហើយ
That should be all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bekchim, for answering my questions.
This is for Councillor Koppe. We have just learned that we'll probably not have a transcript available during the break, so we have promised, on the other hand, a ruling after the break on your question. So my question here is, would you be able to repeat the question that you actually want a ruling on, because we very likely won't have the transcript during lunchtime. My understanding was that it is not so much this one question, which has been answered anyway, but one aspect related to torture evidence you wish to have clarified, so perhaps.
Well, I'm not sure if it's torture-tainted evidence. My question was, and I tried to be as literal as possible in my memory, whether Mr. Bekchim is aware of the fact that he has been implicated as belonging to SAY's network. That was my question.
At least this is a question you wish a ruling on.
Yes.
Yes.
President, thank you. The time is appropriate for a lunch break. We will take a break now and resume at 1:30 this afternoon. Court officer, please assist the witness in the room for the witnesses and civil parties during this lunch break, and invite him as well as the duty counsel back into the courtroom at 1:30. And security personnel join Sati to take Kyo Sampon to the waiting room downstairs and have him returned to this courtroom before 1:30. The court is now in recess.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ